Well, Mike, I went to war with the dogs, the NAFO war dogs, and it was a big mistake, brother. I ended up losing pretty bad. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Not a clue. I only saw the wreckage after the fact a couple days later. Obviously, a little hiatus recently since our last episode, but boy, was it a bloodbath out there.
We have very different viewpoints on many things.
But a lot of these issues are American issues. They're not Republican or Democrat issues.
So I picked a fight on Twitter with the wrong dudes. They're called NAFO, the North Atlantic Fella Organization, or the Fellas. And it's a playoff of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization that is this big conglomerate of allies of the United States and, well, currently funding the war in Ukraine. NAFO is a group of fellas, internet trolls, in my opinion, or maybe my opinion's evolved over the last couple days, but I commented that I believe this group is a PsyOp. They are a group of people that support the Ukraine war. And these people come together and they have these meme dog profile pictures, these kind of deranged, sniveling, poorly photoshopped, grainy Shiba Inus that are wearing military fatigues like they're LARPing in these, holding weapons, wearing
Right.
night vision goggles, but they're Shiba Inu dogs, and it's very strange. So, like I said, I called them a PSYOP about a year ago, actually, on Twitter, and at that time, maybe got 10 or 15 comments on that post saying, "Get out of here, you're a Russian troll, you don't know what you're talking about," because that's what these guys do. That's their MO.
Right.
They try, and that's their stated mission. It's apparently a grassroots organization. They fight Russian disinformation by overloading it, I guess, with their memes, with their kind of way of posting. And they found me because this week or last week, a larger guy, Kim.com, who has over 1 million followers, commented that NAFO's gone. NAFO has been dissolved because it was this PSYOP and it was orchestrated, and it's gone because its leaderships have kind of been blown up. And of course, well, the NAFO dogs, they come after him very harshly, post pictures of him wearing Nazi garb, and obviously there's some questionable history there. So I saw that comment and I went, oh, wow, I totally forgot about those NAFO dogs. They must have really gone away. That is where my toilsome hardship started. They searched my profile. They came for me. I think I got something like over 500 comments on my year-old post.
Wow.
Where I said that NAFO is a bunch of warmongering Shiba Inus that don't care about the loss of life, only care about perpetuating this foreign proxy war for the United States. And yeah, they came after me. They took my face. They memed me. They put me, they covered me in dogs. They found pictures of me that I don't even know how they could have found those pictures of me. So yeah, it was very, very scary. It came hard and fast. It was 2 days. I couldn't even use my Twitter account. It legitimately felt like a DDoS attack. Every 5 minutes on my page, I'd have 50 plus notifications of just pure vitriolic calling me a Vatnik, which is a Russian troll or a bot.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was a long, maybe 3-4 day period of just overwhelming DDoSing my page, frankly. And people were noticing, like, what is going on? And I kept tweeting out, I'm at war. This is crazy. This is not like, it's me, one Twitter user versus they're claiming on their post that it's 20,000, 30,000. Some are saying they're over 100,000 strong now of all of these users that inundate this Russian posting. And of course, I'm not Russian. I don't support Russia. What a stupid, strange accusation. We talk about it all the time. If you're going to make an accusation, make sure it's founded in something. Otherwise, you've just reduced the authoritative, stance that you're trying to make here. So if you call me a Russian, anyone who knows who I am, that's such a stupid thing to say. I have no affinity.
I think that's a very unfair judgment. Skeptical is a fair, description of you, and I think that that's warranted considering the continued loss of life and the trajectory of this conflict. Right? It doesn't seem like there's any other way forward but just long attritional warfare, and for there still to be a Ukraine, there has to be Ukrainians left alive to do so. So, not that we want to capitulate to Russia, but at a certain point, you do have to have these conversations of what is the cost worth, right, of this conflict.
Exactly, Mike. And that is what my point was. So as these posts are coming hard and fast, and I'm trying to respond in the most diplomatic way that I can, just to try to
Right.
lessen the blowback now of kind of provoking the wrong group here, maybe inadvertently, maybe a little bit intentionally. But the truth
Right.
is that they came for me, and it was vitriol, it was hatred, it was total attacking and antagonizing me, except for a couple individuals that said, no, I don't think that you understand what NAFO is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody actually leveled with me and said, I understand. It seems like you didn't really even comment on the topic or the subject of the Ukrainian war or NAFO or all that in your post. You just commented on the fact that we look a little funky because of these kooky dress up profile picture
Yeah.
dogs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I resonated with that comment. I'm like, actually, yeah, I support the Ukrainian cause. The Russian invasion by Putin is unjust. Nobody argues that. Nobody on the right, no Trump supporter argues that. What a strange thing. But so some of the more level-headed ones say, no, NAFO is not monolithic. You can come in as long as you support Ukraine. You can actually become a part of NAFO. All you have to do is donate to Ukraine. In fact, it's right on their website of the
Yes.
fellas. If you do donate to Ukraine, to a legitimate cause that they support, and then you provide proof of it, well, they make you a dog. So, Mike, what do you
Yeah.
think I did?
So exactly, man. Got to fight fire with fire, right? Or can't beat them, join them, I guess would be the better phrase. Yeah.
So this is two-pronged. As I've said now multiple times, I support Ukraine. I support Ukraine. Ukraine is being attacked unjustly. Ukraine has every right to defend themselves. There are people dying in Ukraine. They need aid. I donated to a company called St. Javelin. I think they provide drones to the war effort, but I also think they provide humanitarian effort. It's a Ukrainian-based company. I bought t-shirts. They're cheap t-shirts, but I spent over $60 on them. So, hey, I materially helped Ukraine. They are going to get something from this money, or if nothing else, I've helped this company continue to survive there. So, boom, I've done my part. Not good enough, Mike.
Yeah, I saw that caused quite a bit of division in the ranks there, and that's very strange because, again, I was not familiar with the NAFO as an organization, and ironically, I started looking at some of those accounts that were popping up. I'm like, wait, I kind of follow one or two of those guys. I myself had inadvertently been following one or two of them for a year, but I had no idea the breadth and scope of this organization. But also, too, like I said, they're not, or you said, they're not monolithic. And I found it very interesting how some people, there were a handful that were very gentlemanly about it, and they took the time to educate you. But then there was just plenty of, very abrasive ones that did not agree with your ability to be able to join the organization, even though you went and followed the only requirements to be able to join, right?
You're right.
A few of them inadvertently blocked me after I came on 3 days later to try to defend you, which I thought was a little strange, to say, hey, listen, we're just a bipartisan podcast. Block. Okay, cool, guys. You're not really interested in the conversation sometimes, it seems.
It's funny to me that there were some sort of leadership that I kind of provoked out of the woodwork here, because the whole stance of NAFO and their whole kind of we are organic, they're a grassroots movement. That is at their core. And it's so important because it shows that this is organic support for Ukraine and it's not manufactured. In fact, one of their biggest arguments that they are constantly making online, and you can see it in dozens of my posts, is that the Russian propaganda effort and the propaganda machine is so powerful that this was set up to fight that. Now, that's true, right? You go on the news, you go on the internet, and everyone says this Russian propaganda machine is so powerful. So, well, I did some digging and I wanted to understand how exactly grassroots is NAFO, because like we were saying, some leadership of this organization came out of the woodwork. It was somebody named the NAFO HR rep, and their screen name is Goblin. So very serious person. In their bio on Twitter, they are a social media terrorist. That's what it says. And obviously that's a joke, but I'm going to bring up in a minute why that's actually kind of important for what this organization is trying to accomplish. But they're grassroots. So wait a minute. Now there's leadership. There's someone obviously managing this website. There's someone obviously making these dogs or denying people from making these dogs. So wait a minute. Is it grassroots, or what would be the alternative of that? Is it potentially astroturfed, which means it's kind of put in our faces and not exactly real? So, NAFO dogs. I don't know if you're listening to this, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but the University of Adelaide did a study back in 2022 that showed the bot usage from not only Russia, but both sides of the war effort. And what this showed was very, very concerning. It was that 90%, mark my words, 90% of the bot posts that were found to be posted on Twitter within only the first 2 weeks of the start of the Ukraine war, 90% were pro-Ukrainian bots.
Yeah,
So that's
right.
5.2 million tweets, and 90% of them
Wow.
were pro-Ukrainian. I've tried to find other studies that identify the breadth and the scope of the Russian propaganda, because you turn on the news, you read any newsletter, you read any sort of mainstream authoritative outlet, and Russia is the propaganda machine. Well, what does that mean? What is verified propaganda? Does it mean that they've already won the war? We don't see that being posted. Does it mean that the United States is collapsing? Well, we don't see that being posted by Russia. So really what they're doing is they're quote unquote sowing division. They're just getting within our ranks. They're just weakening our citizenry and our relationship. And that's fine. I acknowledge that. I admit that. That is bad. That's a bad actor. That's propaganda. But for someone to say that that's not happening on our side from the United States, or that's not happening from the Ukrainian side, from Eastern Europeans that have gotten together and set up these bot networks that are in the hundreds of thousands now, at their own admission, hundreds of
Right, right,
thousands of
right.
people posting for NAFO. So I tried to find what is the breadth and scope of the Russians. Well, we know the IRA was in 2016, and I don't know if you even know this, Mike. It was determined that the entire reach of the Russia's Internet Research Agency was less than one viral Ben Shapiro Facebook post.
Oh, wow.
One, which could garner tens of millions of views. The IRA in its entirety, throughout all of its accounts, barely even elapsed tens of millions of views. I don't believe they even reached 100 million views. So they were a literal blip on the radar. And then you go further. There are other networks of bots. We have articles where Twitter had made sweeping bans, but it was 100 Russian bot accounts. 100 accounts. I received over 520 comments on my post alone from 100% pro-Ukrainians. So to show the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian bot accounts on Twitter posting Ukrainian propaganda with the stated mission, the clear goal of raising money for Ukraine to buy weaponry, to perpetuate the war, to continue the loss of life. By all accounts, there's over 1 million casualties between Russia and Ukraine.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean,
When
in an all too perfect scenario, right? We could just come to some sort of agreement, and maybe even an ideal one. The borders were respected, Russia pulls out and stuff like that. But we have to kind of weigh the cost of life up until this point. And then I like the phrase that a bad peace is always better than a good war, right? So it doesn't matter how just a war is. It's always the job of diplomats and leaders of a country to find some sort of concessions to bring about peace. That requires two good faith actors, so that's very hard when you're working with someone like Putin. But it doesn't mean that we should ever stop trying, right? These tiny strips of land, the initial oblasts that the Russians, invaded. Is this amount of life lost worth that tiny little strips of land? I feel like we're almost entering a World War era style, not trench warfare, but if you look at the last 2 years, battle lines have not moved very much. The crazy offensive that Ukraine has been able to push into the Kursk region is like, I think maybe 100 square kilometers, which is like a little speck on the map here. And it just brings me right back to all the books and podcasts I listened to about World War I, where they fight over and over and over again, and tens of thousands of people are dying for 1 mile of land. And just doesn't make sense, when you really look at the long, game of things. And unfortunately, Russia has lots of men to throw into the meat grinder. So if that's the kind of war that you want to fight against them, they could definitely outlast. So I don't know if that's the best strategy for Ukraine moving forward.
100%, Mike. And these, listen, I found in this study another very interesting comment, and it's about the language that is pushed by these specific accounts that come up. And like you kind of said, is it about ending a war, or is it about putting more bodies into a meat grinder and continuing to push this war? There are many ways that we can end a war. But pushing more men and more boots into a ground, into more bullets into barrels, that is not the way to end a war. We need to end this through diplomatic means. So first, let me touch on what I found in this study. And remember I mentioned that this HR leader of NAFO named Goblin, real professional, who has a little Karen haircut on the Shiba Inu dog in its profile picture. Well, they're a social media terrorist. Obviously a joke, you would imagine. If they're any bit of a good person, they don't want to be associated with terrorism. But these bot networks have been found to push specific language that increases specific emotions, what's been labeled angst in this Australian study. And I like that it's an Australian study. It's not United States, it's not European, it's not Russian. It's kind of out there, you know.
Yeah, they're all the way down in the Pacific, so hopefully they're a little, they're not biased. They have a clear head and they can look from the outside, yeah.
They use words specifically, and they did a heat map. I'll put it on the screen. Shame, threat, threatened, panic, desperate, terrorist, one of the largest words. And these words push the narrative. They push the narrative that the Russians are bad, which they are, but that now the only way to get out of this is to fight, fight, fight. The other words that they push: moving, stay, send, go, come, fly, fall, leave, going, sending, all implying people are coming, going, moving, refugees, money must be sent, money must be taken, right? All of these things that are stirring up this emotion in real users, but it's being pushed specifically by targeted bot networks. And then the last network of words that they sent forward were relating to work, relating to governments. So president, government, governments, leader and leaders, recruits, reports, office holder. So all of these things push that, right? These conversations around what our government is doing, these conversations around Zelensky and whether or not he's a hero, which I'm sure is another large portion of what they're pushing here. And hey, the guy very much is a hero. Again, I'm coming at them. I'm very passionate that these folks are a astroturfed, centralized disinformation PsyOp organization. However, I still support Ukraine. I still don't agree with Russia. But I'm not allowed to join NAFO, and the reason is quite simple. The reason is because I support Donald Trump in 2024. And it's because they feel that he isn't going to continue to support Ukraine. But Mike, honestly, you follow politics likely closer than I do, especially in the Biden administration. How many times has Biden or Harris spoken with Putin in an attempt to try to end this war? And that's a legitimate question.
Right. Again, I would always say that, it requires two good faith actors, and actually to tie in an upcoming interview where we're really looking forward to, Professor Sergei Radchenko. It's going to be the Cold War history. He's a historian on that subject matter. And then his most recent book, To Run the World, it's understanding Putin, how he's a product of that experience. Putin will always respond, or will only respond to force, essentially. But do we have enough force to be able to, get him to respond in a meaningful way? So that's it, is, how many times are we going to slam bodies up against this line of Russians? And again, there's been some successes, but they're not significant enough to merit this loss of life, it seems. So yeah, even if the Biden and Harris administration reached out, I'm not sure it would, land on any ears that would do anything about it. But again, you never need to stop trying. You always have to keep trying. And that's definitely something that we're not doing enough of, is trying to bring people to the table and discuss it. Yeah. A 100-kilometer, section of the Kursk region, I don't think is going to bring Russia to its knees and to the concessions table, I don't know what some sort of offensive is going to look like to be able to do that. There's plenty of people who say there's something in the works, but if we remember, even a year before, Ukraine did launch an offensive, and it only undermined their, whole operation. Reading some foreign affair articles recently, these offensives only destroy the manpower needs that they are experiencing anyway, right? So they don't have enough troops to be launching their best troops into these offensives that go nowhere. Is just a continuation of loss of life and weakening further their ability to defend, their country. So it really does speak to how this war could just definitely go on if our intentions are to do it by force. There has to be diplomatic channels to be able to bring this here, and either administration, be it Trump or Harris if she wins, they need to be the diplomats and try to bring this to an end that way.
Well, just the way that we saw this organization attack and DDoS my profile, which is a simple a bipartisan profile that
Yeah, yeah.
happens to lean Republican. I mean, it's wild. So right, this organization is grassroots, decentralized. There is no monolith in the way that they think. There is no rule book. But it came out that no, you can't join. You support Trump. Mike, my understanding is that they haven't even reached out to Putin to have this conversation. And listen, I understand what you're saying and I respect that. I get that force is what makes sense to them. But what I would say to that is, well, why did their invasion, why did the conflict almost pause in entirety when Trump was in office? And maybe that's because of that perceived force. He managed to do the same thing in the Middle East. He managed to do the same thing in the Korea Peninsula. And that's why we carry that big stick proverbially, and that's why I think that Trump is able to accomplish that. So to say that Trump is the antithesis of Ukraine, to say that Trump is in the pocket of Putin, is such a distorted piece of disinformation. And I will continue to use the harsh language when I describe NAFO, because they are at the purest form of internet information warfare.
Right,
They are
right.
a psychological operation. They are a PsyOp. They are a propaganda outfit. And they are disinformation. They run disinformation campaigns. Whether or not the information they're pushing is accurate, the fact that it is a bot network, it becomes disinformation. So, NAFO, I imagine my account is going to be overrun for the next couple days, next couple weeks, and that's okay. As I'm saying, I support Ukraine. I donated to the Ukrainian cause. I don't support the unjust, aggressive invasion by Russia. I condemn it. But
It's
I
good.
also condemn what they do online because it isn't fair and it isn't in support of democracy and it doesn't lead to the end of the Ukrainian conflict.
It's going to be very interesting to see their reaction if they bother to listen to this episode, because when I did come on a few days later, trying to, I guess, do some damage control and figure out what the heck happened, I don't think they knew what to do with me. And then once I explained our podcast a little bit better, they were all kind of confused. A lot of people just started flat out ignoring us at that point and move on to other targets. And then I may even seen like an official call off, if I'm not mistaken, like, all right, we've done the damage we need to, we're good, we smoked Cooper online, kind of thing. So it really does speak to the fact that it's much more centralized than they like to portray. And listen, we're in a new phase of warfare. It's informational warfare wins the day. Doesn't matter what conflict the U.S. was involved in throughout history from World War I onward, right? Everybody uses propaganda. That doesn't mean the causes are just or not. It also just have to question about what kind of information you're putting forth, through this, right? Disinformation is not a good way to have an honest conversation, right?
Right. And actually, it's interesting to redefine these words because these words have been made pariahs. They've become this boogeyman to say we need to ban all disinformation. And listen, it does not uplift democratic principles. So maybe there is some merit to banning all disinformation. But I think my point was going to be, we don't need to ban these people. We need to understand where that information, where that messaging is coming from. We need to be discerning. And that is the mission. We rattled the apple cart of NAFO to their top levels. We are two small guys that only have a couple dozen thousand followers between our channels here.
Frankly, it was an honor. I felt privileged to have this much attention from such a large organization, right? They thought that we were such big fish in an effort to undermine what they're doing, right?
No, exactly. And that's what I was going to say. It was so interesting to create these ripples because I really think that it exposed these chinks in their armor, or it exposed the kind of flaw in their logic to say, no, we're doing good. No, we're decentralized. No, we have no coordinated messaging or no upper management. All of that became untrue very, very quickly as soon as you question their most basic principles. And all I said was, remember, guys, I prefer and prioritize domestic politics over that of foreign politics. And that's totally fair for a person to say.
Yeah.
Many people this year are going to vote based on just their view on immigration, just their view of abortion in this country. They don't even have any clue what's going on overseas.
Sure. Single issue voters. Yeah.
That's their right to do that. And listen, I talked crap about them in a previous episode. I don't think that's the best way to vote, but you absolutely have to prioritize what policies are more important to you. And speaking of priorities, Mike, this is a great opportunity to congratulate you. The birth of your first kid, your son, a beautiful boy. Awesome, man. You are welcome to the club of being a new dad. congratulations. He's beautiful, and we're really proud of you over here. We're really happy for your family.
Thank you so much. The real hero is my wife. The delivery to recovery and stuff like that, and being such a patient mom as well. Just a little trivia is there was a brief hiatus, right? We missed last week's episode, but the one before that we recorded, we were getting those early warning signals, and we weren't sure, like, is this true labor or not? The timing is real close, the whole 511 thing. So we're like, all right, honey, like. And she, this was her idea. She said, no, I want you to do the podcast. Just go do it. So, my God, what a champion, I said. And I came back later, an hour after the podcast, and she's like, the pains haven't stopped. And I'm like, it's time to go to the hospital. We're getting that baby out soon. And man, it was exciting as heck. That's all I can say. I'm not happy about collectively 3 to 4 hours scattered across a day of sleep, washing bottles and doing laundry on the clock. But my God, is it rewarding. I love my little man so much.
Awesome, man. Well, congratulations again to her and to you and to all of your extended families. And as soon as you went out and took your little hiatus, thanks for coming back, because you could see what trouble I get myself into when I'm left to my own devices.
You can see the bags under my eyes. I'll be here to protect you and come back on this podcast if I have the physical energy to do so. Don't you worry about that.
No, awesome, man. But listen, if we have captured the attention of some of the more pragmatic or nuanced NAFO fellas here, listen, you can tell that we're genuine people here. Listen to some of our other content. And then, Mike, you touched on an upcoming interview, and I just want you to give a little bit more of a teaser about that, because I know you've started his book. You've talked to me really heavily. I'm just finishing up one for our other interview on the Civil War before I move on to the Cold War. But if you could tell us a little bit about Professor Rodchenko and what you're looking forward to and how that plays into this conversation, I would be grateful.
Absolutely. So Professor Rodchenko is a British-Russian historian, and he extensively covers the Cold War history. And then his most recent book is is focusing on Putin's role in all of this and how he's a product of the Cold War experiences. And I think probably the most important concept that he talks about, and he lays it out right from the get-go, is the USSR, Soviet Russia, and then now Russia. Again, they might be different names, but they're still the same culture. They're still the same framework of thought. We're still in a post-World War II world, right? All of our politics today are dominated by what has occurred from the post-World War II era. So the thing that he talks about the most is the quest for legitimacy versus power. And when I say legitimacy, I also mean both internal and external. So to clarify that even more, that's to have your government recognized internationally, either as an equal to the United States, right? They may have hated communism, and there was the battle of capitalism versus communism. But if you can get an international agreement respecting each other's spheres of influence, that legitimizes the rule of Soviet Russia, right? So this is whole.
Isn't this going to bother NAFO then? He's a Russian who's supporting the Russian cause now.
No. So he's not necessarily supporting the Russian cause.
Okay.
But he does an excellent job of helping you understand, what's the motivations behind all of this. So that's kind of the whole point is, Putin's not going to respond to much else but force. But the way to maybe bring him to the negotiating table is to make concessions that improve his legitimacy. So now all of Putin's efforts, it can all be framed in him trying to restore the glory of Soviet Russia. When that peak or pinnacle is really hard to tell. We're a little biased. We believe our capitalist and free market and mixed economy system, well, clearly it did outperform them. The USSR collapsed trying to keep up with us.
No debate there.
Yeah, there's no debate there. But the issue is, if you can give Putin some tiny bit of legitimacy, it may be enough to bring him to the concession table. Maybe that is giving him portions of those oblast regions that really might not meaningfully contribute to the economy or for either country, but it might be enough to allow Putin to bring a victory home to his people, which is hundreds of thousands of dead, an entire war economy that doesn't make sense for the consumer anymore and stuff like that. So the issue is, a Russian leader will always forego power if it means that he can attain some amount of legitimacy. You've seen articles for decades since Putin has come into power. He's outlasted 5 presidential terms at this point. He's not going to come out of power by some accident. There's no foreseeing event in the future that's going to not come out of power. So you kind of have to just deal with the rules of the game as they are now. So again, that question of how can we give him a tiny piece of legitimacy that might not be a concession on our part too much, but it might be enough for him to kind of go home with a pseudo win and be able to stop this whole conflict.
Yeah. Well, I know that if you were to share that in a conversation with one of these NAFO fellas, that they would not accept that. If any 1 inch is ceded to Putin at this point, that is unjust because of his aggressive nature to start this. And hey, I understand that. If you and actually I do hand it to a lot of the more, I guess, if they're real people or legitimate people, and some of them were, a lot of them were Eastern Europeans in Hungary and Poland, in Ukraine itself. And
Right.
those people definitely get a voice. I'm not trying to say that they don't, right? It's when
To that point, exactly. I think this is a just cause, but who am I as an American to tell them to continue to shed blood, right? That's their decision
right.
to make, and but I don't want to be the one to force Ukrainian men in front of bullets. That's not my place.
Right. I don't want to go to a ballot box and say whether or not Russia should cede the Crimea to the Ukraine.
Right, right, right.
I'm not even saying, I'm saying the Ukraine. I sound like this foreigner who doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, because that's what I am. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And all of a sudden, though, we're now in the media being talked to still about a border bill where the first line item on $100 billion of spending is $65 billion to Ukraine. So it's really, really awkward that this is the top United States political issue. And
I as well as you hate an omnibus. I wish we could do single issue bills because it more clearly identifies, someone's voting record. So it's very important to see a voting record when you are deciding if this is a politician that I want to vote for or not. But that becomes completely obfuscated when every bill has like 10 different issues kind of packed into it, right?
well, I think it just happened last year, Mike, that the UK finally paid back their war bonds from us from World War II.
Yeah.
So it took 85 years. I'm curious if Ukraine will need about 85 years or more to pay back some of what we're giving them, and it's magnitudes larger. So, hey, Mike, with that, I'm really grateful for you hearing my story here. I do really, really hope that some people listen to this and take it for what it is. Yes, I could be a little provocative. Yes, you guys still are a PsyOp. Take that for what it will. This has been Elevated Thoughts.